Okay, we are live on the Facebook page.
Hello, Facebook.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Facebook.
Okay,
Oh,
that
God.
works.
Everyone.
And
Hello, Facebook.
okay,
Oh,
that
God.
works. And you got to remember to turn the sound off on Facebook, or you hear 6 versions of everything going on, and
I do not.
it's really confusing.
My voice say that again.
I don't think we have Facebook open. No, we don't have Facebook open.
I don't either.
Okay, and we are live on YouTube. So it's working.
I don't think we
All
have Facebook
right.
open. We don't have Facebook open.
There we go.
Okay, cool. And there may be like a time delay, so our facial expressions are not going to line up with everything, but we'll sort through it. We'll figure it out.
Our dog is really excited that we are doing this live stream right now. I think he's hearing the voices and thinking someone's here. He's sadly mistaken.
Oh, awesome. Okay, well, we're live. It's working. There you go. We trust the technology, and so we should introduce ourselves. So I'll start. I'm Richard, and I'm the pastor of House of Learning and help to lead a Jesus Church College, because we're kind of pushing this throughout 2 different channels. So we're all wearing 2 hats, but it turns out that our college team and our House of Learning team are kind of the same team. So it's not going to be too confusing. And who we got at the bottom?
Is it the same bottom for everybody? I'm still learning.
Oh, yeah. So Amber and Ryan, you are the bottom for me.
And
I
for me.
assume everyone else sees the same.
Oh,
that's
no, we're on the right over here.
That'll get confusing then. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, so my name's Ryan, and I'm a deacon for the House of Learning, and help out with some teaching and such at the Jesus Church College as well. And so, yeah, that's me.
And I'm Amber. I'm on both teams as well. It's really fun to see the overlap between House of Learning and AJC College.
And now in my top left
is me.
is you. Now see, it's my screen that's going live. So if I say
There we go.
top left, everyone
true.
knows who I mean, apart from you guys.
Oh,
Okay.
perfect. There we
I
go.
wish we could rearrange it on our screen. So
Well, my name is Molly. I'm on the college team as the Dean of Students, but I also jump around in quite a few ministries, one of them being House of Learning. So we're excited to be here. This is the first time we've ever done something like this. So figuring out all the nooks and crannies of going live on a Zoom call. But
Yeah.
for those of you who are watching, we're excited you're here. It looks like a couple people on YouTube have already joined us.
Yeah, it does. I saw Larissa said hi.
Yeah, hi Larissa.
I'll have to I can't click on your name. So I can't see the photos well enough without getting really close to the screen to see if I recognize who that is, but that's awesome. And yeah, Molly, you've been doing loads of stuff recently. And so you've been popping up doing Devos and communion.
Oh, yes.
And you are like the familiar face.
Yes, it's been fun to get to know the camera side of things. I would much prefer being in front of a group of people over being in front of a camera. That has gotten I'm grieving the loss of normal church for sure, but it's better than nothing. And I'm really encouraged by our Westside team, who's been able to produce such a high quality online church for its members, and so hope you guys have been blessed by that as well. It's a really hardworking team behind the scenes. So we're really thankful for them.
And we've gone low production, where we are just streaming the Zoom call and hoping that you guys can hear everything we say and see us. And yeah, well, we'll do the best we can, and it should be awesome. And so just want to give you a shout out. We're going to go through the book of 1 Samuel. If you've got a Bible, you will need a Bible. So grab a Bible, or grab one of these and look up 1 Samuel, and we'll dive into that. And this will be like, it'll kind of be a bit of a class. I mean, you've got 4 Bible nerds in front of you, and you'll probably have others joining in the near future. Tim Reed is one of the other deacons for House of Learning, but he's got like kids coming out of his ears this evening and couldn't join us. And Tim, who does is part of the college team as well, who's also one of the pastors of the church, could join us as well. But yeah, so you've got a bunch of Bible nerds, and so it'll be kind of like a class, but we really want everyone who's watching to get involved. And so as we start unpacking the book, we want to know your comments and what you've got to say and your questions, and hear from you guys. And so we're trying to recreate what we would normally do if we were in a classroom on a Wednesday evening together, where people would be interrupting and saying, well, what about this? And have you noticed this? And all those kind of details. And so, yeah, encourage you guys. We're trying to keep an eye on the chat and pick those up as we go along. So in the style of Bible classes everywhere, should we start, because we're going to ask God to speak through his word, by praying?
Yeah.
Okay. Molly, you were the most vocal. Do you want to pray?
Yes, of course. God, we just thank you for time set aside to dive into your word, to hear you speak to us through your word. I've just been so encouraged lately by your word, and I think especially in the time and season we find ourselves in, feasting on things that give life have produced so much more fruit than things than feasting on things that produce anxiety and fear. So we're just so thankful for the word of God, that it is alive and active and encouraging and strengthening and comforting in times of need. And I'm just so thankful for this team that has a similar heart for the word of God, that we just get to dive in and explore what you said to your people way back when, that still has live relevance to us today. So just thankful for the story of 1 Samuel that we're going to be diving into, and thankful for everybody that has stumbled upon our YouTube or Facebook channel that gets to join us and gets to participate in coming around the table, reading the scriptures in community together, even if it looks like it's over a virtual platform. So God, we just thank you for this opportunity and pray you bless it and speak to us, encourage us. I've just been struck by the ways in which you've spoken through your scriptures these past few days, as in things that I've needed to hear very specifically. So I just ask for more of that tonight for everyone that's listening, that there would just be something specific that the Spirit highlights for all of us, and that we would be deeply encouraged that you, God, see us in our circumstances, and you want to encourage us through your word. So I pray that you would be glorified tonight in all we say and do. Amen.
Yeah, amen. Awesome. So shall we start by having a think about where this book fits in the sort of grand scheme of all the rest of Scripture, and in the story of what God's been doing so far, and things like that?
Yes, that's a great idea.
That's awesome.
There you go. So who's got something to say about that? So this follows the book of Judges, and it although in our Christian Bibles we've got some books in between Judges and this, but in the Hebrew scriptures, the way they ordered the story was to have this follow the book of Judges, and there is like an interesting follow-on in the narrative, right? So we can talk about why the ordering is different another day, but
I think honestly
know that it's different.
Something that's interesting, just thinking about the ordering, is you've read Judges before, as most of us have. By the end, you feel really something that's interesting, just thinking about the ordering, is you've read Judges before, as most of us have. Sorry, that's back and forth. I could hear.
Yeah.
I hear.
All right. I think Facebook played a little bit of that conversation back alongside the rest of the conversation, just to make sure you're absolutely paying attention.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, if you've read Judges, it's just really a bummer by the time you get to the end. You really begin to wonder what God's doing, and it can feel really hopeless by the time you get to the end of Judges, and it's disappointing, and then obviously when you're reading the Protestant Bible, you get to Ruth in the middle between Judges and Samuel. But if you're thinking chronologically, by the time you get to Samuel, it's almost like a breath of fresh air and like a drink of cool water after the just agony of Judges, and just the cycle of disobedience, crying out, or disobedience, oppression, crying out, judge, peace, then back, and that just repetitive cycle. Samuel's like kind of throws a wrench in the middle of that, and shows you that there is still something going on behind the scenes that we might not see when we're reading Judges just at face value.
Yeah, the way things are, like Judges is such a downer, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It, like the tragedy escalates and you get to the end of the book and you're just like rape, murder, like, whoa, what's going on? This is like so dark and horrible. And then, you then jump into Samuel and it's like a huge change of tone. But there's this similarity as well. And so Judges, the kind of spiritual ineptitude of the leaders is on the, well, actually the ineptitude's on the rise. They're not doing well.
Yeah.
That theme's going to be carried over in Samuel, because you've got the house of Eli who are completely inept as spiritual leaders. In Judges, the kind of immorality culminates in this horrible like sexual misconduct, and you've got sexual misconduct in the beginning of 1 Samuel as well. And then you've also got the end of Judges is this like tragic military defeat. And then again, in the beginning of 1 Samuel, you get this tragic military defeat where, Eli's sons die and the ark is carried off by the Philistines. And so it is interesting because it's not just that you turn the page and start a new book and then all of a sudden it's a new chapter and everything's bright and peachy. But actually, you've got some of the same tensions, the same difficulties, the same problems. And yet the thing that makes a difference is God partners with some people and the tide gets turned. And so I like the way it really reflects the role of the human in what's going on in the story. It's because there's other stories where things change, like Noah's Ark, and God uses Noah and stuff, but that's kind of God just being like, I'm going to do a thing. Okay. Whereas this is, the human is much more involved. And so I don't know, I feel it applies to us so much more directly than thinking about, where do I stand in the story of where I live and what's going on? And so I like the practicality of it.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Richard. I think, I just, continuing on with that thought, there's this famous line in the book of Judges that everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And I think it speaks to the corruption that has taken place in humanity. And God has invited them, like from the very beginning, to view Yahweh as their strength. So he is their provider. He is their protector. He is the one that takes care of them in all capacity. And they have chosen to look to their right and to their left for sources of provision, for sources of well-being, for sources of military strength, you name it. They've looked everywhere else they could except for looking to God as their strength and as their source of life. And it's an interesting pattern of the repercussions that come about as they choose a different way of life, because God has so freely invited them to trust him, to do all things and to take care of all things. And instead they choose to do what is right in their own eyes. And it's a pattern that we saw since the beginning of time. Genesis 3 points out this same kind of brokenness in us to declare independence from God and instead think that we know better. And then we see the detriment that takes place as the book of Judges kind of highlights just how horrible it can get if we all do what is right in our own eyes. And so,
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
just
what-
wanted to add to that. Yeah.
And what's interesting is that so that's kind of the line that's touted throughout all of Judges, is that they were doing what was right in their own eyes. And the upswing that we get right at the start of the book of First Samuel, the kind of indication that we have that something new is going to happen, is that we have this standalone woman who's actually dedicated to listening to the Lord and obeying the Lord, and what comes out of that is this son that's born, Samuel, whose whole life is dedicated to actually listening to the Lord and following his direction, and calling out the iniquities of people like Eli and his sons who aren't listening, and kind of are still that pattern of the old generation from Judges that are still trying to do what's right in their own eyes. And finally a man like Samuel comes along and says, we're going to have to stop that if anything's going to change. We're going to have to finally start doing what's right in the eyes of the Lord, and listen to him and follow his word. And so yeah, I think there's a very just an interesting correlation there, the line that's touted constantly through Judges versus what we actually see in action in the book of First Samuel.
Yeah. It is this huge. I like that as a foil for this book, you know, do what's right in your own eyes, and then this kind of follow the Lord motif. It's interesting because another thing that happens in Samuel is it's a fulfillment of loads of prophecies that arrive around the time of Moses. So like in Deuteronomy 18, there's this promise that there'll be another prophet like Moses who will lead the people. And it's, as we go through the book, we'll try and keep pointing out all of these ways that Samuel is portrayed as a second Moses character. You know, both of them are born in times of oppression. Both of them grow up in a different household. You know, and it's going to keep going on, riffing on that. But one of the interesting things is there's only 2 prophets in the whole Bible that are called faithful, and it's Moses and Samuel. And so, you know, we've had this smorgasbord of people just doing their own thing, and then there's like something unique about this person's ability to follow the Lord and be faithful to the Lord and stuff like that. So it's, maybe we should have done Judges first, and then we would like really get the change, but then we would be so depressed after weeks of reading Judges. So we'll not do that. So should we, I'm gonna assume that people might not have a Bible, and read a little bit actually out loud as we go. You guys up for that?
Reading out loud, that's always the best way to do it.
There we go. So I'll read a little bit, and someone else can do the next bit. So there was oh no, I got all the names. That was a bad. There was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim of the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, the son of Jehoram, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephrathite. He had 2 wives, and the name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah.
Peninnah is how I usually say.
Okay.
Who knows if it's right?
I think I've often said Peninnah, and then I've doubted myself and stalled and got confused.
Peninnah. I think that's what it is in Hebrew. Peninnah.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. Who's done the most
Going
Hebrew?
with it.
Who's done the most Hebrew?
I think
technically Ryan. The language.
Amber,
Yeah, but
Amber and I are both in Hebrew right now.
Most Hebrew is a different question.
You know what?
It's not my favorite language.
It's not important.
Peninnah. We did a lot of work with Hannah and Peninnah.
This would be our first stopping point.
Anyway.
Yeah, so I don't think this is the stopping point we want.
How we're supposed to say this word. I'm going to carry on reading because we're right near the end of the paragraph. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. And so we read that actually in the sort of cultural context, these were quite shocking statements that were being made, right?
Yeah.
So, so the 2 wives. Have you guys learned what the names mean, Hannah and Peninnah? So I looked this up because I was interested. I put you on the spot, like you've got all the Bible names memorized. But Hannah is this woman of grace, or gracious woman. And Penina, I'm just going to go for Penina because that rolls off the tongue and feels right to me. She is, her name means pearl. You know, so I don't want to read too much into the names, but it's interesting that someone of grace really fits the character. And then we don't actually learn a lot about Penina other than that she wasn't very nice. And so of these two women in this family, I kind of think, you know, one was gracious and had character and the other one was just the eye candy. Like, you know, she was maybe pretty, but there was no substance there. So it's just the fact that her name means pearl is kind of thought-provoking. I don't really know what to make of it, but yeah, it's interesting. So let's talk a bit about not having children.
Yeah.
Right? Because that was a big deal. So God in Genesis said, be fruitful and multiply. So the expectation was if you were doing God-shaped life, then you would be fruitful and multiply. And that if you weren't able to multiply, then there was something wrong with you. You'd been cursed, you'd be ostracized, shunned, devalued. And so much of people's value was wrapped up in having a large family, preferably with lots of sons. You know,
especially women, that's the thing, is women already didn't have a ton of value then, and so for a woman to already not have a ton of value and then to not be able to bear anything, let alone a son, is just not an ideal situation for Hannah at all.
Yeah.
Basically, so I'm going to keep reading.
Can't do the one thing she's supposed to.
We're going to get this play out. Yeah. All right. So this man, Elkanah, used to go up year by year from his city to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Penina, his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. That's like supposed to exaggerate. And all her sons and daughters, man, so many. But to Hannah, he gave a double portion because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival used to provoke her grievously and irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? All right. So if this was like a daytime soap opera, things are hotting up now. Right? So, yeah, all sorts of interesting details going on. Just because we've said about Hannah being this woman who's childless, which makes her kind of seem a little bit weird, well, not weird, ostracized in society. And she's going to be the hero of the story through which we move from the like tragic downfall of society in Judges to the rise of culture that's going to culminate in David through Samuel. And it's like the scriptures are trying to help us understand who is it that God can use to make that sort of difference. And it's a rural, childless woman who actually is the one who's effective in turning the corner and influencing the whole nation in going this new direction. So it's really cool because it's such a pattern of God using the downtrodden, using the outsider, using the oppressed to bring justice, to bring hope, to bring salvation, all of these things. So and the fact that she's just like oppressed by this woman, you know, needled all the time, you know, she's not just, I don't know, her actual circumstances are that people have reason to look down on her, but also her daily reality is people keep bringing those reasons up. that's the picture that's painted. This is a horrible situation that she's in.
I think it's worth mentioning too that in the midst of all of the disobedience and like radical independence and everyone doing what was right in their own eyes, we see that Elkanah, or you were saying Elkanah, again, the names.
We have to say the names next time.
He seems to be a faithful man. He goes and he offers sacrifices. He's kind to his wife, Hannah. And you even see later that he's faithful to go to the temple to worship and to offer sacrifice. So I think it's worth pointing out that he, even though the story isn't necessarily highlighting him, and I tend to err towards wanting to like capitalize on the women that are mentioned in the Bible, since there's not as many as men. However, I think it is worth mentioning that Elkanah seems to be a man of noble character in the midst of a people who are radically disobedient to Yahweh, their God. He seems to be faithful in the midst of it.
You're right. And the more we read on in the story, the more we're going to see that he keeps doing some really cool things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually interesting that this ancient writing, right, that God has inspired is so different. We would expect that ancient world to put the man first. And you might be thinking, well, if Hannah was really cool and followed the Lord, but her husband was a complete jerk, then I get why you would want to tell us about Hannah. But actually, she's married to someone who seems to be really pursuing God, honoring God, and yet still we get enough information to know that about him. But there's no doubt the one moving the story forward, the one making the decisions, the one praying the prayers is Hannah.
Yep.
Like, she's the one who's actually brought about this change. And so, I love that she's in the foreground.
Yeah. Me too.
It also makes me think about, there's just a really interesting, like, trying to put myself in her shoes and think about the way she would have felt about herself and her place. Nowhere, like, it doesn't record that she retaliated in anger against Peninnah. She's just like taking all these blows. And I can't help but think she must have had amazing reservoirs of knowing who she was, knowing why she was valuable, things like that. Because we're going to see that she carries in herself great faith to ask for some radical things of the Lord in the next section.
Yeah.
And yet, then I step in the shoes of Peninnah, and I think, why would someone like that, who lives in the same household as someone else, cause so much friction and angst and strife?
Right.
And I was thinking about this while I went for a walk this afternoon. I thought the only reason I could come up with, and maybe you guys can think of another one, but I thought the only reason that came to mind was that she did not have really an anchor for understanding her own value. And so this was an opportunity for her to elevate herself by grasping at the fact that she had something that Hannah didn't. And trying to promote herself in her husband's affections, in her neighborhood's affections. And there's something broken in her that would cause her to act this way. And there's echoes of so much of our modern talk about, where's your value? Do you understand who you are? Are you settled in who you are and centered in who God says you are and things like that? And I just think, wow, Peninnah seems like someone who really lacked all of that stuff.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. I think that the more secure you are in who God has made you to be, the less you need to promote the extremities that you find value in order to grasp at anything to give you worth. And I think even like from a competitive lens, it looks like Peninnah is trying to play into a competitive game by comparing her circumstances to Hannah's and making her feel bad about things that are outside of her control because of her insecurity. And it's heartbreaking because as much as it is clear that Hannah knows who she is and who she belongs to, it's still painful. Like you still get like full humanity on display as Hannah cries out to the Lord, weeping bitterly, and is grieved by her circumstances. It's not like she's so strong that it doesn't hurt. I think people often mistake the two, like, oh, if I'm strong, that means that I'm not affected by pain and suffering.
That's such a good point.
But I think she's able to display a relatability in womanhood and in humanity as well, to say, like, I know who I am, and I can still grieve my circumstances.
Yeah.
And I think Penina, I mean, in addition to not having her identity rooted in something more firm, you don't really get a sense that she is aware of Elkanah's love for her, because we don't see it. Like, we don't see, at least from the text, him say anything about Elkanah's love for Penina. It's only Elkanah's love for Hannah. And I mean, for crying out loud, he's staying with a woman, Elkanah is, who's not bearing him any children. So that also shows his love and his concern for the Lord and for Hannah, because he's not just ditching this person who's not bearing him any kids, but also you see him say, where we left off, why are you troubled? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? Like it feels almost like his heart is with Hannah. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with Hannah still crying out to the Lord, but it is interesting that we just don't see that Penina knew that her husband cared about her. And that probably contributed to her lack of identity. Not that if he would have cared for her, then she instantly, all of her problems would have been solved. But to be in that just strange situation back in that time, to watch you not really get the care that someone else is getting, really does a number on your self-esteem. And she had children, but maybe she didn't have something deeper that she wanted, which also would be maybe an instigator for attacking, which is never right. I mean, that's never the answer. But to see that juxtaposition too, that you just don't feel like there's a